Yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and hit the button so if I don't fucking forget later.
Okay.
So you ready for this?
Kinda. I mean, I've read through the outline and I've tried to come up with good answers.
I don't expect anything to be like scripted or anything like that. I don't know why anybody would expect that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm just gonna title this, how much high school sucked. That's basically what my entire fucking senior semester has been. It's just why does high school actually fucking suck?
Yeah.
This is like one of like three projects that I'm doing like centered around something around this
All
topic.
about high school. That's funny.
I mean, pretty much. I don't know how it got to be that way, but that's just kind of how it went. But yeah,
I'm sure it'll turn out good.
I hope so. This is my senior project. I'm not
Uh,
gonna say that I need it to graduate, but like I kind of need it to graduate.
is this like your capstone thing?
Yeah,
Oh, I didn't know that. That's a lot of pressure on me.
not really. Let's just start from the top. Let's just talk about how we feel like high school just kind of handled our education. Like, how did your high school experience go in terms of how they taught you things?
So honestly, I didn't hate high school or like the way that they taught it. Um, like it wasn't necessarily a bad experience, but I think there was just room for it to be better. And one of the things that I never really liked was like how standardized everything was. Like all the professors always taught about, okay, well, we have to finish this by this week because, in our curriculum or whatever, there's this much left that we have to cover. And so it's kind of like, oh, so there's a lot more we could be going into on this. We're just kind of getting, a thimbleful of the information, but we have to move on because you're told on what you have to squeeze into the semester.
Oh yeah, I remember that completely. That was so annoying, especially when it comes to like history classes. You
Yeah,
think about
for
how
sure.
much history gets fucking skirted over because
Mhm.
of, a time frame of a semester. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. And history, I love learning about history. And it was one of those things where it's like there's a lot that goes into what makes these events happen. And so when you just kind of generalize and just give like the main reason, it doesn't really
Oh
give
yeah.
it credit.
Yeah, I feel that. And when I was in high school, we of course had like the strict curriculums as everyone does. Um, but I feel like the way that they kind of handled our education was I feel like my high school was very blunt with it, being from further up in the upstate of South Carolina. A lot of the high schools around there were very more blunt in that, we don't really care about you, but we have to do this, so do it.
Oh, dang.
Very more like there wasn't really like a facade they were trying to hold up. A lot of the teachers though, I remember so many teachers trying to be like, well, you need this for like this kind of thing. And like, for this reason. The teachers were very much trying to be helpful and trying to explain to a lot of students because our retention for like true information was low. We had so I can't remember like a single person, especially in my friend group, that actually like cared about school. But I
Yeah,
remember I never really understood this. I cared about school so much. I was basically a teacher's pet. I had every teacher that I had like wrapped around my finger. But at the same time, I took school at like face value as like, get through this and get to this kind of thing. So
yeah,
I kind of wish I had taken it more like for granted, like I do at college, where I feel like I take things in and actually learn things here.
for sure.
But I feel like the administration really did not care about our education. They cared that you attended and didn't overdose on campus.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a that's might be a specific story though, but that is what it is. I don't know. I never got the feeling they that they either taught the teachers how to express to us that our education was important or that they just didn't really care how our education was important.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I go on,
Yeah.
go
In
on.
high school, it was for me, it was always, I cared about school, but it was more so like I care about getting A's and B's, right? It wasn't about, oh, I care about truly understanding what they're saying. And when you compare that to college, like at USCB, I still care about getting A's and B's and all that, but I feel like I really can't unless I understand what's being talked about. Does that make sense? Where it's like in high school, you
Yeah.
can almost not fake it, but in high school, you can memorize things for just long enough to get the grade, and then you'll know that it's never going to come up again because we have to move on to this next week. And
Yeah.
that's a big difference for sure.
Oh yeah, that is such a big difference. I remember coming to college and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna take the information long enough and then just, derail onto a different topic. That is not how college worked. And I went to a 2-year school for my first college experience, and it knocked me on my ass. And I was like, I
Mm-hmm.
as much as they made out college to look like a nightmare to high schoolers, the only reason that it looked like that in any sense is just because of the stark difference from high school to college, in the sense that you actually have to remember the things that you learn.
Yeah.
And, colleges, teachers vary from how they teach things. And so I feel like that was the biggest issue for me, because there are still some college professors that focus a lot on, you know, memorization and getting it down, and like kind of like a high school way of teaching. A lot of my like math classes and my biology classes very much like here's a question and here's an answer kind of classes.
Mm-hmm.
Those still kind of operated in the same way for me, and they were a little bit easier for me to manage. But then when it came to like English classes, I never realized that there was that kind of difference in classes, just in terms of like how questions are answered. In like
Yeah.
an academic, like a math class, it's like you do have that question and there is a solid one correct answer. In an
Mm-hmm.
English class, there's never a correct answer, and I never understood that in a high school class because there's always a correct answer.
Yeah,
And that
for
was
sure.
so different for me. I did horrible. My two papers that I wrote for English 102 my first semester of college were both D papers. They were awful. I look back at them now and yeah, they deserved it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's definitely that shock, like when you get to college and you see the difference between, you know, how people interact in these classes. I still remember my freshman year English class. It was like a literature class, and the professor was always asking questions about, whatever book or whatever we were reading for that week. And you're right, when he went around the room, he was never looking for one solid answer. And even if a student said something that he had never heard before, he wouldn't go, "No, I don't know about that." He would go, "Interesting. Tell me more about that." You know,
Yeah, yeah. Like there's
and
never a wrong answer in a college literature class, and that was so bizarre. It's like from coming from an environment in a school where there is always a correct answer and always something to memorize and then regurgitate later, which is a
yeah,
problem in its own. But
yeah, because
and then going from that to this, it's like it forces you to actually take in the information and form an opinion about it, and it's weird.
mm-hmm,
Yeah.
definitely.
But I don't know. It's just what were your like required classes that you had to do? Like for me, I remember, you know, when you were a freshman, you had to take like a certain English class. When you were like a sophomore, you had to take geometry and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it was kind of the same thing. At my high school, it was, you had your English, math, history, and science, and there was, like a level for each year, except for math. For math, you could kind of, you could be up a few levels or maybe down a level. They're kind of flexible with that. And then
Oh,
you also had to have two art classes, but it could be like any kind of art.
yeah.
And then like physical education was another
Yeah.
one you had to have.
Yeah, I remember. I think that was the class that there were certain classes that you had to take like in a certain year, and then the certain classes that you had to take at least once, but you had
Mm-hmm.
to take them. And PE was the thing. I hated PE. Um, I always say notoriously that my high school PE class is the class that I notoriously broke my nose 7 times.
7 times in one class.
7 whole times in 1 whole semester, and it
That's
was
crazy.
1 for every, like, sport unit that we had. That was a nightmare for me personally. That's why my nose has a nice bump on the top for my glasses to rest on. Um, but I remember that we did, like, the sophomores took geometry and, like, the seniors would always take Gov and Econ.
Uh-huh.
I think the juniors got left out. I think the juniors, that was the time where you decided if you wanted to be an AP or honors student. It's like, if you're gonna do that, do it now kind of thing. Did
Yeah.
your school have like a separation between like the CP and then normal and then honors and then advanced?
Yeah, for sure. Because
Hmm.
I was pretty much always in honors classes. Uh, and I remember there was one time I was in a science class that was not honors or AP or anything like that. It was biology one. And I don't know how I ended up there, to be honest. It's the only non-honors class I ever took. But the like the classroom setting and the way the class was taught, just between like those two levels, like honors and regular, was insane. It was a completely different type of
Oh
class.
yeah. I
And
remember somebody was
then
talking to me about like an AP Lit class and they said it's a whole year class and you write like one paper and you just read books the whole semester and I was like that sounds like a weird class. And then I came to
mhm,
college and I was like, "Oh no, yeah, that checks out."
yeah, yeah, and I took an AP class my senior I took two of my senior year, and those were really different as well. But the school did kind of bracket them differently. I remember when freshmen came in, they had the option to like start off. I don't know if they're AP classes, but they were like above honors classes. And
Yeah.
they were called the Eagle Scholars, and they got like special merch they could wear because we were the Eagles, and they got like
What were they,
special.
Beta Club?
I don't know. They got like special merch they could wear, and they were proud of themselves for being Eagle Scholars. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know if the classes are really that different. I don't. I was never an Eagle Scholar, but
That
you could
sounds like
tell that
so
like
yeah.
it was like a class system, almost.
A literal a class system for your
Your
classes.
classes, exactly.
That's just great. I don't know. So I found this little source as I was doing some research for this. It says that according to an article from Palmetto Promise in 2018, 42% of full South Carolina high school graduates are college ready in the subject of English, 30% for reading, 24% for math, and 20% for science. Only 14% of graduates in the state have actually reached the college readiness, like the benchmark shit that they make us take. They
Hmm.
only 14% actually like reached that threshold. But in the article, they blamed this on funding mechanisms and a lack of robust education choices in every community, with it being like outdated and like failing teachers and students alike. Um, did you feel like when you graduated high school that you were college ready?
Uh, Somewhat, I guess. I mean, I felt that's a tricky question. I mean, I applied to colleges with the hope that I was ready, and and
Oh yeah.
I didn't like take time off. Like I was very much like, okay, I'm leaving high school now. It's time to go to college. But I don't know if that was more so because I felt ready or more so because I felt like I had to. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I feel like I was pretty 50-50. Like I don't think I was super confident, but I also was like, surely I can do it. If these other people can do it, I can do it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I came from like a hick town. So I was looking around at some of these people getting accepted into 4-year colleges right out the gate, and I was like, if they can do it, then I can do it. But also,
Hmm.
I applied to a 2-year college before I went to a 4-year, so that my first degree would be fully paid off and I would have less debt than my peers. And also, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't have to take the SATs and the ACTs because I was a terrible test taker growing up.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, what do you think there's anything that your school could have done to make you feel college ready? Like
Uh,
anything that they didn't do?
that's a good question.
Mhm.
I'll say there was one teacher that I had in high school. He was a math teacher, and he was kind of known for being like a stickler for the rules. And, he wasn't mean, but he was just very direct about things. And he always said, I want you to understand how to do things by yourself without me spoon feeding you. It's like, because if you go to a college where there's, 100 kids in a lecture hall, your professors are not going to have time to spoon feed you this information. Um, and I feel like back then I was kind of like, okay, you're just, being a jerk. Like you could easily stop at my desk and help me understand this. But he wanted us to think and he wanted us to figure things out by ourselves because he knew that not every college was going to be able to, offer that direct attention. And
Yeah.
I feel like if that was like a school wide thing and not just one guy teaching us to think like that, I feel like that could have made a
Yeah.
huge difference for sure.
I totally get that. I remember, you know, I never necessarily had an issue with like my teachers like, spoon feeding you and just kind of just being like, here, do the thing.
Hmm.
Um, but I do kind of wish that I had seen more teachers that were willing to like take a step back and to let their students like fuck up. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And then
Yeah, for
to
sure.
come in and correct and tell them how to do it better next time
Hmm.
because it would have been such a great experience to be able to do things like a math problem without like having to pull the teacher aside every single time and having to figure it out. And I'm not even like a math major. I took my let's see, when I came to USCB, I took exponential mathematics. Um, and that's essentially it reteaches you how to do like algebra and stuff like that. And like the end of it was like probability. It was a nightmare. I had never learned anything like that. But then I looked back at some of the work I had done in high school and I had done those things. And I was like, why? It's like all of a sudden I don't know how to do this. And it was because I remember the teachers were constantly, stopping by, "Hey, how you doing? Let's figure this out together." I
Hmm.
needed the room to be able to do it, and even it had only been 2 years. I
Yeah.
if I felt like if I totally agree with what you're saying that I might have been better at some of the things in school if I had just been given the room to do it and
Mhm.
not like held the whole way.
Yeah, for sure. And that's how it was at my high school too, where it's like you were still expected to do things and you're expected to figure things out, but very rarely did they give you opportunity to just, work through it on your own and see how far you get. It was always
Yeah.
kind of like we all need to stay on the same page here, so let's, one step at a time. Which is
Yeah.
great if you're trying to learn it for that day. But if you're trying to like remember it, I feel like it'll stick with you a lot longer if you figure it out because then you could do it again. You
Yeah.
could always work through it again.
I remember I had a chemistry teacher. Chemistry, awful. The teacher, great guy.
Mhm.
Um he had this like mantra, I guess, and I don't think that this was allowed in school, but he did it anyway, which was what makes him great. He would have made a great college professor, but he said to all of us, he said, if you can find the answer online, he said, it is not cheating. You looked for the answer, you researched, and you found the answer. Because he knew, he's like, I don't expect everyone in this room to be able to do even basic chemistry by the end of this semester
Yeah.
because chemistry is hard. But
Oh
he would
yeah.
always tell us never to feel bad about like, we can't figure out the answer to this problem. So we would look up the homework online and we'd find full PDFs of the homework. And it was like, the
Mhm.
resource is right there. Like, why wouldn't we use it? And he made us, feel okay about trying to help ourselves out and not to feel guilty about getting through things.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, especially with like certain degree programs, there will be like classes that you don't necessarily want to take or that don't really pertain to the field that you're kind of going to.
Mhm.
Um, so you got to find a way, either through it or around it. And if you can't go around it, you got to get through it somehow. It's like
Yeah,
when
for
I had to
sure.
take that exponential mathematics, I had to find a way through it. I did not cheat through that class, but I did figure out a way through it. And I feel like encouraging kids to find other ways to do the things that they don't want to do
Yeah.
is helpful and not just making them stick to one direction the whole time. I feel like
Mhm.
that would have been really helpful at my high school as well.
Yeah, there were definitely experiences like that at my school too, where it's like the the answers or certain like uh pages of information were out there that could really help a student out if they found it. And teachers had very different outlooks on it, where it's like, if you
Mhm.
if you summarize using this site, then that's cheating. But if other people would be more relaxed with it, like a chemistry teacher would be like, no, the information's out there, you're learning it one way or another. I remember we had to do like a test on the book Wuthering Heights, and someone found like the exact test, like word for word, answers in order that the teacher, this is in high school, the teacher was going to use. And it had all the answers on it. And of course, everyone in that class does really well on that test, but
Yep.
not because they wrote the answers down and snuck in a cheat sheet. They just learned what happened in the book in a more broken down, way by studying that test the night before or the week before the test. And I remember she
Yeah.
was furious because she knew that not everybody read the book that well to get all those details. But it's one of those things where it's like you're using a test that's out there. It summarized the book. It summarized what you think is important about this book, apparently.
Yeah.
So, that's what people
I
are going to
mean,
use.
I feel that in terms of like things like, I don't know, like Cliff Notes and Spark Notes and those kinds of things, I know a lot of teachers that had like some personal problems with those websites that would
Hmm.
break books down for you and even give you like summaries and like full analysis and like things that students could use to formulate their own opinions about things. And
Hmm.
teachers had so many problems with students not actually reading the book and just going off of that, which I understand.
I
Cause
understand it too.
I understand it because if as a teacher, I would want someone to at least give the book a try to read it. Cause I know there's a lot of books out there that are painful reads.
Hmm.
So it's like just give the book a try, but then don't dock points for them going to a different source to try to figure out like their own opinions on things. Like not everyone can come up with an opinion just on the spot. Sometimes people need like need something to bounce ideas off of kind of.
Yeah, and I can see why teachers have a problem with those kind of sites. But to that, I would say, well, then maybe don't write a test that your questions seem like they're pulled straight from Spark Notes, right? Like maybe a better way
Yeah.
to test your
It's like
students on this,
where did you get your test from? Can you answer me that?
because it almost seems as if like all the information that you seem important on your test is what Cliff Notes also seems important enough to jot down in the summary. So it's like, maybe if you have a problem with that, I'm not saying that like students doing that is the fault of the teacher, but maybe instead of doing like an actual test, you could have like a classroom discussion where students get points for talking about themes from the
Yeah.
book and examples of it.
Or
Because
have them write a
then,
short paper, short answer
yeah,
test.
and you can have them expand on these ideas. And when they have to expand on things, maybe that those details aren't on Cliff Notes. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the little things kind of.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. So I want to talk about STEM, like just the acronym STEM. I'm assuming you know what STEM means.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
yeah, like science,
Decent
technology,
idea.
engineering, and mathematics and all that. So have you
Mhm.
heard of STEAM before?
I have not heard of Steam before.
So STEAM is the same thing as STEM, but it adds arts and in parentheses humanities as well. So it would be like the
Okay.
liberal arts and stuff. So this little definition that I found from a source, it's, STEAM is kind of like a kind of education that provides students with kind of an opportunity to learn creatively and to use like 21st century skills as problem solving. Essentially what it wants to do is it wants, to use kind of arts to help support, sciences and engineering, like, using like an artist thing to make like something you're engineering like look good or something like that.
Okay.
Uh I have a problem with this personally because
Oh.
the problem with STEAM is that it only is arts and humanities supporting STEM, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not the other way around. And
Mm.
that's the what I kind of see as like a problem with it is it's just it's not flipping back and forth. It should be like an interpersonal relationship. It shouldn't be just a one-way street because even though it's trying to include like the arts and humanities as like the same kind of work level as these other things, it's really just continuing to like downgrade it because it's like, yeah, these things are here to support us, but we acknowledge them.
Yeah.
So I kind of see it as like problematic when it comes to like the collegiate level especially, but what do you think
Mhm.
about it?
Well, after hearing it like that, I feel like that's a pretty good way of putting it. Like at first, you say, you say STEAM, and it's one solid acronym, and all this stuff's in it, and it's like great. We're seeing some unity between these fields, and there could be
That's what we
some,
want to see.
yeah, there's some mixing and matching, but you can't just look at that and then not pay attention to the downsides, which would be what
Yeah.
you just said about um the regular STEM portions being promoted and supported. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. Maybe
I
maybe
I
they shouldn't be.
really I want to support Steam. Like I want to be able to look at something and to be like the psychology behind, no, psychology is part of humanities. I don't know, the engineering behind this massive structure that someone built for an art piece, it works because of this.
Yeah.
And it's artful because of this. That's the kind of relationship that I think we need to see not only at the collegiate level but at like the secondary school level, at like the high
Mhm.
school level. I mean, can you imagine if in high school that they were able to tell you how certain disciplines kind of went together and things weren't so like isolated almost?
Yeah, that would have been really cool to kind of see the
Yeah.
crossover between different things.
Yeah, I think it would be like a really interesting thing. I really want to be like a supporter of Steam, but as it has been like implemented like recently, it's only being used with the arts and humanities being like a support structure, and it's not,
Mm.
going the other way, and it's not very much like an interpersonal relationship. It's more like a like one-way street.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
But but let's say that schools like did implement these more like interdisciplinary like kind of studies at the secondary level.
Mhm.
I personally think that it would like bring together a lot of disciplines that are like brought together in collegiate classrooms. It would be bringing like more discussions between like English and history, for example, or like math and sciences and geography and English, geography and history, like economics and math and geography and government, and like kind of going off of that. Like, what kind of do you think that connections would have been more helpful in like your retention of information and like being able to see like why you might need it for a certain
Oh,
thing?
for sure. And I mean, even just as like, you know, in these classes when it's all broken down like that, and it's just one little subject at a time, I feel like we said earlier, it's about memorizing it long enough to get the grade. But when you have the crossover of these different areas and subjects, I feel like that no matter what is going to help increase your understanding of the subject, which is going to help you learn it better because you actually know what's going on. And you lifted off a few subjects, and yeah, just I mean, you could just look at like geography, history, and economics, like put those together. If you're learning about World War II, you kind of really have to understand the economic situation of these different countries because that plays a big role into how
Mhm.
things went. Or and staying on that same subject, you hear about, okay, well, this group was occupying this area, or eventually the Nazis moved into France. But if you don't have an understanding of the layout of Europe, and I feel like a lot of high school students might not really know what Europe looks like.
Yeah.
You that saying, "Oh, the Nazis occupy France," you might not understand how catastrophic that is for the Allies during World War II. And
Yeah.
that's just one example. I'm sure there's endless examples of how
Yeah.
including these other areas could really just broaden the information that you're taking in, and it's going to really help you understand the subject better.
Yeah. I completely agree. Um, I think it would have been so helpful for me personally to have a better understanding of like the history behind literature. I love literature and I used to struggle so much with history, but seeing history through the lens of literature is an eye opener like no other. Like being able to
Mm-hmm.
take like I'm trying to think uh that story from I believe it was Jonathan Swift who wrote the story about, the famine in Ireland, but he made it a story about, cannibalizing children so that he could get his point across. And
Mm-hmm.
seeing like Gulliver's Travels, how a lot of that stuff was very politically driven.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are so many like pieces of history that I've seen through the lens of literature and being able to understand it better because of it because you can see how people felt about things in that time. And
Yeah,
it made it
definitely.
so much easier to understand. I would have loved to have had that kind of thing in high school. I feel like, you know, we always get like the combination of like government and economy classes in high school, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it kind of needs to go farther than that. And I also feel like that those classes aren't necessarily like bringing these two subjects together. It's more of like, here's your government, and here's your economics all in one semester because we can't think to put another class in the schedule right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But do you think that schools would ever implement this, or what do you think about that?
I think that's definitely possible. I mean, even just us just talking about it right now, it's kind of exciting to think about how these subjects could really be enhanced by this. And I think it could happen. I think the the big thing right now stopping it is that teachers have a lot on their plate. Teachers have a hard job, don't really make a lot of money, and so I feel like expecting them to fully teach one subject is already maybe not a challenge. Maybe that's not the right word, but it's a big task, to have them teach
Yeah,
history for or whatever. So if they're not really uh, well versed in economics or
yeah,
geography, then maybe it would be difficult for them to fully teach like a combination of subjects unless
yeah,
schools set up where like they planned it out where it's like, okay, well in geography class we're learning about what directly relates to what you're learning in history class right now. If they did something like that, I mean, that could definitely happen.
yeah. Something as simple as that. Yeah, I fully agree. There's as much as I'm so like down for this kind of plan, there's still a lot of downsides to it that I can kind of see, or not downsides necessarily, just like difficulties in implementing this.
Mm-hmm.
Teachers do have a lot on their plate. They have way too much on their plate. They're teachers, sometimes they're therapists, they're mandated reporters, they're, parents to some children. They have way too much on their plate already, and they do not get a lot of reward for that kind of thing. And they would need more certifications if they really wanted to make things like more not condensed. If they wanted to combine more disciplines like that, a lot of teachers might need to go back and get another degree, but school costs too much for that. So then you got to, figure out, well, it's like maybe we could lower the cost of school and figure that out. And then that becomes a whole different discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I feel like maybe bringing in like how teachers have like planning periods. I
Yeah.
doubt that a lot of teachers would want to sacrifice their planning periods, but something like that, where it's like you have a period where you're helping this teacher do this kind of class, and then you have your planning period. But
Mhm.
that's not my expertise. I'm not an education major.
Yeah.
Um, but I worry that their schools would never implement this. I'm doing a separate paper for a different class about how high schools are knowingly raising students to be obedient yes men and employees for all these companies that want all these people to do the jobs and not reward them well enough for it.
Mhm.
Um, and that's something that's already kind of hard to change. And that's something that I'm like writing in this paper and I'm like seeing this and it's like this is not going to change without like some serious pushback because
Yeah.
schools these especially like people that are on the board of education, they don't want to change. And if they stop, their ways of making these high school students into these kind of like yes men who do whatever their bosses say because that's what they were taught to do in high school, your workers, go down. And that's an
Mm.
issue because then, the economy and all that stuff. I can tell I didn't pay attention to economics. I have no idea what happened to the economy. But I I really want to see this kind of be implemented in the high school setting, but realistically, I can't help but think about how it would never happen because of like a capitalist society that we're in right now.
Yeah. It's all very true. I mean, you know a
Yeah.
lot more about this stuff than I do after, I'm sure, endless hours of research. Um,
Endless hours. I mean, what is an hour? I just know a day.
mhm.
But I don't know. I do you have like any experience in kind of not even just like with like an interdisciplinary studies program, but like have you ever done like it like cross discipline kind of work just offhand randomly?
Hmm. Let's discipline.
Like have you
Uh
ever like written a paper for like an English class, but you had to reference like a psychology article?
oh. I'm trying to think if I have. I'm sure I have. I feel like I've
Yeah,
had to,
a
but I
lot of
don't
people
know.
have.
I can't think of like a direct example, but I'm sure I've done it.
Yeah.
Um,
It shows how easy that kind of thing comes to people.
mhm.
Because I'm writing a paper right now and I have a psychology source about repressed trauma. It comes to people so easily. So it would be easy to kind of implement. I don't think it would be a strain on the students to kind of grasp the concept. It would just be the process of implementing it and, maybe rewarding teachers for all the strain that you're actually putting on them. I
Mhm.
don't know. But I would love to see this implemented, but
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to happen, even with how easily the students might receive it. But I really think that it
Yeah.
would help with like the retention and the things that we would want to see out of our high school experience, which like with the retention of things and not just being shoved aside and being like, oh, you'll need it one day, just go to class, move on.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people who think it would be a good idea. I'm sure there's a lot of teachers who think it'd be a good idea. It's
Yeah,
just what it would take to make it happen might be more than what people are willing to, offer up.
yeah. And
So,
that's the reality of a lot of ideas nowadays, is that it's more work than it seems like the output would be.
mhm.
So I've mentioned a lot of things so far about like teachers' pay and economics and stuff like that. And I've always said, that's a different conversation. But I think somebody needs to have that conversation because these plans are fully doable. But, I'm not the person to implement them. I'm not somebody who wants to go work for the Board of Education. But I'm
Mhm.
saying that these plans are possible and they are not difficult for the people who would benefit from them, like the students. And then teachers. Teachers are not compensated enough, just like we said, and they would need to be compensated properly before we could even think about implementing something like this.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. So a closing like little quote that I had found from an
Okay.
article says that the interdisciplinary scholar is not a jack of all trades, master of none. Often the trades themselves are revealed to be arbitrarily divided, and the mastery comes by way of working at the interface of those diverse materials and ideas. And I never knew that people who worked in interdisciplinary were referred to as a jack of all trades, but a master of none. And which I I felt a little insulted because to
Yeah,
imply that someone, you'll be good at all these things, but you'll be a master of none is just not
yeah,
true. Because
uh-huh.
I'm not a jack of all trades. If you ask
Mhm.
me, I don't know, what animal, does this, I'd barely be able to answer that kind of question because I don't know anything about like STEM things. I don't know a thing about that kind of stuff. But if you
Yeah.
ask me a question about like an opinion on this kind of piece of literature, I could give you an answer. So
Mhm.
to say that the interdisciplinary scholar is just like a jack of all trades is kind of meaningless. And I don't, but I do agree that it's, you get all these like diverse materials and ideas. And I feel like that kind of thing would help you to be a better student. And I feel like students might find find a path for them that works straight out of high school because we both talked at the beginning about how we kind of felt obligated to go to college in a
Mhm.
way after high school because it's like, what else are you supposed to do? There are other things to do. There's
Yeah.
trade schools, there's going to other kinds of schools. There's, learning these things off of the internet for free,
Yeah.
being entertainers, content creators, and it doesn't have to be so like, here's a path and you can just branch off later. You don't have to do that. Because by the time you
Mhm.
graduate high school, most people are either on the cusp of being legal adults or they are legal adults.
Yeah.
So I feel like you don't need to wait. It's like 6 years in the future to branch off and find your way because you can find it now.
Mhm.
It doesn't need to be that complicated. So I feel like if we had these kind of like diverse materials and ideas through interdisciplinary studies implemented, it would help students to maybe find their way a little easier.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. I feel like this would definitely produce more well-rounded students, which I think would really open their eyes as they move out of high school and into whatever area they want to go into. Even if I was graduating high school and I said, okay, well, I don't really want to go to college. I'm going to go out and I'm going to get a job off the bat. I'm going to start working. Um, I still feel like having a decent understanding of how the world around you works is still extremely valuable, even if you're not moving on to a college setting.
Yeah, it's
So,
super valuable, understandable. I mean, if you think about how many students, even if we want to bring like politics into this, you think about how many people you've met where it's just like, yeah, I used to be this kind of political belief and now I'm this kind since I've come to college.
mhm.
People's opinions change when they go to college and they start learning about like how the real world works, how the real world works. Um, I feel like, why do we have to wait 2 years into going to college to figure that out? Why can't they know that straight out of high school? Is it because they'll go off and do something that benefits them and doesn't benefit your capitalist society?
Mhm. Mhm.
Maybe. But that's another decision for another time.
Oh yeah.
But thank you so much for doing this with me, Wyatt. I
Oh,
really
of
appreciate it.
course. This was
I know
fun.
you love to
I
talk shit, so
I do. One of the one of the things I'm good at, you know,
yes.
being a jack of all trades.
But a master of none.